We are very honored to have here on the stage three distinguished representatives representing Korea, India, and Singapore. And following our dialogue here, we will have the European and the Arctic states perspective. The formal title of this part of the plenary sessions is New Frontier, the future of the Arctic. And the essence of that is that for most of the 20th century, not to say previous centuries, the Arctic and even Antarctica as well were basically unknown territories. We used to say in Iceland, we had a saying in Icelandic in my early years and before, that we lived at the edge of the inhabitable world. That was our vision of ourselves, that beyond Iceland there was nothing. If anybody had said at that time that what was north of Iceland would become this new economic, political, scientific playing field, I think the generation of my parents and grandparents would have found that an absurd notion. So, we are now in a new reality of the Arctic being not only of great concern to the Arctic states, but also of the global community, including the Asian states represented here, as well as European states, the Middle East, as others. And I think the establishment formally last November of the Emirates Polar Program is also a wake-up call that in addition to Asia, we now have a leading country in the Middle East and others having entered this. And of course, as was mentioned before, the nature of the Arctic as a huge global territory. In fact, just to remind all of us, if you add up all the territories on the oceans in the Arctic, they are about the size of Africa. They're about the size of Africa. So we are now having the challenge to map out how we cooperate on a vast territory the size of Africa, which of course is complicated in many ways and not just in terms of the different countries, Canada, United States, Russia, the Nordic countries, but also the oceans there. And let's remind ourselves that according to the law of the sea, a large part of the Arctic seas are open for any country to use them. So, in many other ways, it is a new frontier, economically, scientifically, and definitely politically. So, let me open this by asking each of you, and as we have communicated, you will not necessarily make opening speeches, but opening remarks on how your country and yourself see the future of your country's involvement in the Arctic, and how you also, because all of you have been witnessing the Arctic cooperation for some time, what kind of lessons or insights you have drawn. So let me start with Korea. Ambassador, if you could start by sharing your thoughts with us, and then we will go to our good friend Santan from Singapore, and then open the floor to questions, and as before, raise your hands, and we will try to bring the microphones to you. Please, Ambassador Chung.
Thank you so much. That's a great question. It's general, but I think it's very comprehensive. Well, some people may ask that why the Republic of Korea is interested in the Arctic region. It's far away from the Arctic. But you know, the Korean Peninsula is surrounded by the sea, and as Korean people have long acknowledged the value and importance of the Arctic region. We've been made great efforts using our research infrastructures to make contributions to the scientific research, working with the Arctic countries. And also, we've been trying to play as a convener for the formulating Arctic governance. In a nutshell, I can say that Korea has played as a contributor and promoter and convener. As a contributor to the knowledge sharing, we are using our research infrastructures like icebreaker research vessel called Araon, which means all seas in Korea. Actually, we are preparing for the second icebreaker now. We made contributions to the scientific research in the Arctic region, and also Dasan research station in the Svalbard. So lots of Korean scientists are working with scientists from the various countries. And actually, also with our technological edge in batteries and shipbuilding, for example, we are collaborating with Iceland for the electrification of the small fishing vessels. That's another example of the technology promoter, and also convener for the formulating governance. We hosted CALFA, the Conference of the Parties, for last year for the third year in a row. So, which is a very important agreement for sustainable development in the Arctic region. So, Korea, I think, as Korea has played and trying to play as a very faithful and trustful partner for the Arctic region, and because climate change in the Arctic region has actually affecting the Korean Peninsula. So some scientific research institutes released some outcome of their research that actually is affecting the Korea severely. So probably in the afternoon, somebody from the COPRI will explain details about that. And also the melting ice offering some economic opportunities, but I think we are trying to pursue the sustainable development in a responsible way. So that's it's kind of a basic our strategic interest in the Arctic region.
Thank you very much. Sometime.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to firstly, thank President Grímsson for inviting Singapore to attend this very meaningful Arctic Circle Indian Forum held in New Delhi. Also, at this juncture, I would like to commend the Arctic Circle Secretariat, as well as the Indians, Observer Research Foundation for organizing this forum to bring experts and scholars and researchers into the same room to discuss the important topics of Arctic issues. And I look at the title for this afternoon's session. It says the new frontier. Indeed, this is a new frontier for Singapore, because for people who have been to Singapore, you know that we are situated 1 degree 15 north of the equator. And then we are about 7,000 to 10,000 kilometers away from the Arctic, depending on where you go to in the Arctic. Like North Pole is almost 10,000 kilometers away from Singapore. So you're so far away from Singapore. And why is Singapore so interested and seized with the engagement in the Arctic Circle? The reason is very simple. The reason is because what happens in the Arctic doesn't really stay in the Arctic. It actually has rippling effect to far-flung countries like Singapore, which is so far away. So in order to make sure that Singapore can continue to develop and thrive in the new age of the Arctic melting, sea level rising, then we have to go beyond our shores to put our head into the Arctic waters to see and try to understand what's happening in the Arctic. And Singapore's journey into the Arctic affair has started 14 years ago, in 2011, where we first started getting ourselves involved in the Arctic forums and the discussions and so on. And during those years, what we heard, the prevailing narrative was that Arctic is the temperature barometer of the world. And at that time, the Arctic was warming up twice faster than the rest of the world. That was more than 10 years ago, the narrative. 5 years ago, the narrative has changed from Arctic is melting twice faster than the rest of the world to 3 times faster than the rest of the world. And 2 years ago, the latest narrative is that Arctic is warming up 4 times faster than the rest of the world. And one of my good friends, who is a Norwegian Arctic researcher who stayed, for many decades doing research in Svalbard, and he told me in a straight face that in certain parts of the Svalbard, temperature is rising 6 times faster than the rest of the world. And in 1 or 2 locations, it's 10 times faster. So what it tells us is that global warming, temperature rising, Arctic melting, and sea level risings are real. And in Singapore, we have a center, we have an institute called Center for Climate Research Singapore. Its role is to study how climate change will affect Singapore. And this center actually came up with a report that by the end of this century, the water around Singapore will rise by 1.15 meters. This is actually higher than the United Nations IPCC's projections of 1 meter in sea rise by the end of this century. I mean, Singapore is a small country. We always measure with great precisions. And our scientists told us that the sea level around Singapore will rise by 1.15 meters. And that really sets off the alarm bell to the government of Singapore. So, started from a few years ago, we decided that sea level rising is a given. It's not a question of if, but it's a question of when and how. And we know the answers to when, because by the end of this century, it will rise. How is something that our scientists told us that it will be by 1.15 meter. So we have decided to raise Singapore by at least, a 1.2 meters, just to make sure that comes the end of this century, when the sea level really rises to 1.15 meter, we still have 0.1 meter to keep our feet dry. So to us, studying what's happening in the Arctic and knowing what's happening is very important. And as a result, we have put in our national strategy and measures to counter coastal erosion, flood resilience, and also raising our Singapore land mass, so that come what may, by the end of this century, we will still be able to keep the whole of Singapore intact, because Singapore is an island state, and 1/3 of Singapore actually is low-lying. So any rise in the sea level plus the storm surges will actually raise the sea level by 3 to 5 meters. So for most part of Singapore, we are not higher than 5 meters above the sea level. So if we were to add 1.15 meters of sea level rise by 3 to 4 meters of storm surges, particularly during the monsoon season, part of Singapore will be overrun by the sea level if we do not do anything. So this is why we are so seized with our engagement in the Arctic, and not only just to understand what's happening in the Arctic, but we also want to bring our own solutions, share our strategies and experience and knowledge with our friends in the high north, so that collectively we will be able to come up with some common solutions to address these common challenges posed by the Arctic warming, sea ice melting, and the rising sea level. So I will just stop here so that my colleagues will have the opportunity to continue to present his piece. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Admiral Prasanna. if you can share with us your vision of the evolution of the Indian role in the Arctic.
Thank you. Well, this question is generally asked to most of us, like you, Singapore and all, as to why and or since when is India interested in the Arctic and why is it so important? Actually, the interest for India, it's not new. We've been, in fact, it was 1920 that we signed this Svalbard Treaty. And since then, we've been interested, of course, in the Arctic as well as the Antarctic. For any nation, the most important things are its survival, thereafter sustain, and then development, prosperity. Now, we've realized over the years that all these factors that I just mentioned are connected to the Arctic in many ways. For that reason, we gave ourselves our Arctic policy in 2022, where we articulated as to, okay, that in these 6 pillars we'll be interested and taking our work forward. So getting the whole of nation together to work on these pillars and so that we can focus our work. For this, the first was scientific, focus, which is climate change and food security. With respect to that, we realized that it was amply brought out. First was, of course, ice melt and the sea level increase. And since the Indian Ocean is the warmest ocean, the amount of sea level rise will be the highest this side. We have more than 1,300 islands in addition to our 11,000 plus kilometers of coastline. In addition to that, where these islands have the problem of the water level rise and inundation, there are nations close to us, whether it is Maldives, Bangladesh, etc., where in case of sea level rise, we'll have climate refugees. So this is a problem that we'll have to face, if not today, maybe tomorrow. And this is connected to the Arctic. The second issue is, which is amply brought out in so many writings, etc., is on monsoons. We are an agrarian society. My country survives, 20% of my GDP is given by agriculture. If the monsoon gets disturbed, not necessarily fails, I have a problem with feeding my country. Therefore, we have realized that there is a teleconnection between the Arctic and the monsoons. How much, how, where, why, how to predict that we will require to study so that we can have that kind of prediction for our people and we can be amply prepared. So for that reason, that is the monsoon prediction as well as the ice melt, which is related to my food security and my survival, and of course connected to climate change. We are very much interested. Therefore, that is my survival. When next is, and including when is a sustenance, we are an energy deficient country. We are still developing. We will need energy. So the Arctic has energy, but we are interested in sustainable exploitation of energy. For that, we require the cooperation of the various nations and right technology, and so that the right kind of governance in that area, so that sustainable exploitation to ensure green tech is used so that the climate remains as it is, because that is important for me, and then the energy is available. Next is, if you say the prosperity and development, of course, you have trade and investment. If not today, 10 years hence, 20 years hence, 30 years hence, the passages will open. The Arctic will have passages opening up, like it was brought out by Mr. Saran. The trade calculus of the world will change. And then, so therefore the routing of the trade which happens in the IOR will have an effect. We would like to be involved. We would like to know. We would like to invest in the port infrastructure, shipping, seafarers. Next is my, development, my manpower and skilling. You require manpower. When I say you, I mean the region requires manpower. We have the manpower. What is requirement now here is skilling. So we'll skill the manpower as required. Therefore, in all the aspects that I just brought out, whether it is survival, my country's survival, or sustaining, or well-being, or prosperity development, Arctic is connected, completely connected. Therefore, why will we not be interested? We are interested. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, all of you, for these very clear opening statements, mapping out the reasons for the engagement of the Asian state. And as you just said, the Arctic is a survival issue for the Asian countries, the people of Asia. And don't forget, I mean, there are billions of people in Asia. Europe is a small village compared to the size in population terms of Asia. Survival issue is a clear answer, and one can illustrate it as I sometimes do when I am asked by people in Europe and the United States, why are the Asian countries so engaged in the Arctic? Usually, my answer is simply this. If only a quarter of the Greenland ice sheet melts, and it is melting very fast, my friends, very fast indeed. If only a quarter of the Greenland ice sheet melts, the rise in sea level everywhere in the world will be 2 meters. And there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of coastal cities all over Asia. We can start here in India with the big city of Mumbai with 25 million people in Mumbai. That will hardly be livable with a 2 meter rise in sea level. And you have just reminded us, Prasanna, that India has many small islands, but they are also the coast of many other Asian countries, not forget the Pacific island states. So, a 2 meter rise in sea level because of the melting of the Greenland ice sheet will be the biggest disaster for Asia waiting. And as my friends for Singapore sometimes say, the biggest security threat to Singapore is the melting of the Greenland ice sheet. But now we are increasingly aware, secondly, that how the melting of the Arctic sea ice, and it is also melting very, very fast, is impacting the monsoon system and the rain patterns in India and elsewhere in Asia. And that has a great impact on the ability to feed, just in India, 1.4 billion people. How do you feed daily 1.4 billion people? And then you add probably more than 2 billion more in other parts of Asia. If the Arctic sea ice continues to melt. So any concerned leader of the Asian countries has to be concerned with the future of the Arctic because it has a direct impact on the future of their people. So I apologize for making this additional statement, but this is really a burning issue. It's one of the reasons why we are having this forum here in India, to enlighten the world of the huge impact that what happens in the Arctic will have on the future of Asia. So before I open the floor for questions, let me put to you the following question. What are the political hindrances or stumbling blocks you see for an enhanced engagement of your countries in Arctic dialogue and Arctic cooperation, if any? I'm not assuming there are. But do you see any political hindrances or stumbling blocks? I could make the question another way. What are the advantages of the political openings that are now available to your countries in terms of increasing your Arctic cooperation? Maybe sometime we will start with you and then go to Korea.
Thank you. Actually, before this conference, I make a deal with President Grímsson that at a session here, he will ask me the easiest question and leave the most difficult question to my colleagues. Right, so the question is, what is the influence of the governments on Singapore's Arctic strategies? I was part of the government. I retired from politics and also from the government just 5 years ago. So I was actively involved in the government's formulations of policies, projects, and implementations of projects and so on. So speaking from personal experience, in Singapore, government's commitment plays a very key role in shaping public policies. So if the government feels that there is something that is very urgent that requires the government's intervention and influence to deal with certain crises, then the government will literally will do its best to mobilize our resources, to mobilize the people in dealing with, the challenges posed by crisis. So in this instance, a few years ago, the government decided that climate change is really a very important existential threat to Singapore. So to us, we have to really do a lot of things to deal with climate change. That's why we set up quite a few institutions, like Center for Climate Research, Singapore is one of them. And there's another agency called Coastal Protection and Flood Resilience, Institute. I mean, all these institutions are set up to specifically focus on important things that will impact Singapore's well-being and also our survival. For those who have been to Singapore, you know that we are a very small country, 721 square kilometers. We built our city literally next to the water, and our people really live just near the water, sometimes over the water. And to us, rising sea level is something that we cannot take for granted. And therefore, the government actually has decided that we will do a few things to make sure that Singapore is well ready to deal with this challenge of sea level rising. One is that we know for sure that the sea level is rising because we have an institution measuring the sea level around Singapore. And in the last few decades, we have concluded that the sea level is rising slowly but steadily. So over the years, it has risen to a level that is beyond our comfort. So sea level rising is a given. The next thing is that then how to deal with this. Then the government decided to set aside a budget of $100 billion to raise Singapore, to build up the embankments, to reinforce the coastal lines, to build up polders, dikes at offshore islands to provide further or second line of defense against the rising sea levels. So all this will take a few decades to materialize because the situation is fluid and no one can say for sure how fast the sea level is going to rise and what is the best method to deal with all this. So we have been working very closely with leading industries, universities around the world to come up with to come up with strategies and projects that can really safeguard the Singapore's shore. And also our universities, the students are encouraged to take on expeditions to Arctic circles.
Okay, sorry to stop you there, but let's have brief responses from the two of you, and then we need to open the floor for questions. Yes. Ambassador Chung.
That's a very difficult question, but I think I don't see any political stumbling block domestically. As you know, Korea, I think it's one of the rare countries that have the Arctic-related legislation. As we enacted Arctic Activity Promotion Law in 2023. And according to the law, government has to put forward a master plan every 5 years. And every year we have action plan for the master plan. So it's kind of a whole of government approach to promote our activities in the Arctic region. That is the one aspect of our strategy is the meeting the common challenges together. And another aspect is that promoting some opportunities, as you said, that the melting ice is offering in a responsible way. But I think to do that, working together with Arctic countries and non-Arctic countries to further promote our goal, enshrined our related law. So we need some sort of more active collaboration among the Arctic states. But I think it's current situation, current fluid and the difficult situation, some of the stumbling block rather than building block.
Great.
So that's why it's very important to have the frank conversation like this.
Stumbling block per se within our own country, not as much. Of course, it will take time for us to get the pace that we want it to happen. But otherwise, yes, we have a little bit what I see is as an observer we've been an observer nation for the last 10 years plus, and from observer, we would like to move a little more of an action orientation. I would say stand in the council. And from the scientific point of view, because of one nation not being there, part of it from where like it was already brought out about the scientific observations being limited, we would like all of them to be together. Otherwise, bilaterally, we have good relations with everyone. We have no problem, no stumbling block. But together, we would like to have it because of the scientific observations, but we want to have what the wide region of the Arctic, so that for our own calculations, for our own scientific progress. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So let me see if yes, there's one question that was in, and then another one here. Maybe we can take these two questions before you answer. Have the microphone ready there in the middle. Yes, Wasim.
My name is Wasim Saeed. I'm part of the steering committee for the newly established Emirates Polar Program. So I'm taking this opportunity as an advertisement. Hang out till later tonight. But on a serious note, and thank you for all your insights, I have a small comment followed by a question. At the expense of being a reductionist, I'm just going to actually simplify and say the challenges and the drivers for all non-Arctic players to invest in Arctic science is because it's a one planet, and we all share the consequences of the planetary challenges. With that being said, I think we're looking at collaborative models to push forward the science agendas and the action agendas. Now, as non-Arctic actors and beyond the Arctic Council, where would you see a good collaborative framework for the non-Arctic nations to ensure that our efforts are complementary rather than competitive? We don't want new players to come in and kind of over-invest in areas that have already been invested in terms of science and action, but at the same time maintain a sense of complementary efforts. And to that, how would you envision that collaborative framework? Thank you.
So I don't think it's necessary for all three of you to answer unless you want to do it. So I'm not going to press you to it. But I think we might take the answer to this question before we go to the next one. No, let's take the answer first to this question, and then we come to you. Then we come to you. Does anyone of you want to respond to the Emirates question?
Okay, then I fully agree that the non-Arctic Asian Arctic actors from Asia, if they get together, it's definitely a good suggestion, and it's what we all should do. If you are asking, okay, what kind of initiatives that can be taken, there are a number. We could have a cooperation of various universities, which we have. We can get together, like U-Arctic is there, with A-Arctic can be there, which can get in cooperation U-Arctic, so that the polar consciousness can increase in our region to understand, so that more people start studying, more people get involved. One option. There can be of course, far-fetched as of now, but there can be let's say, Asian Arctic Fund, which we'll all get together, invest together at place, so that what we talk of green technology and sustenance exploitation, it can be used there. So therefore, the Arctic is happy about it, we are happy about it, and we reach where we want to. So that is an option. So therefore, we have financial infrastructure investment to education. It can be done. There are numerous opportunities.
Can I just give a short reply? Whether it is an Arctic state or non-Arctic state, all of us actually are stakeholders because, as you mentioned, that we all live, in one planet. So for those countries or even governments who care about the environment, who care about climate change, they should actually work together, either within the country or with the neighbors, to come up with solutions. But the first thing first is to create the awareness that what happens in the Arctic doesn't really stay in the Arctic. And then the second question is that what happens outside the Arctic also doesn't stay outside the Arctic. The two are actually interacting. And in that matter, so I think that all stakeholders ought to really examine what individually we can do as a country, as a nation, to mitigate the challenges brought about by the climate change. And then regionally, we can also work with other neighboring countries like in Singapore, where we are situated in Southeast Asia. There's this ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Countries, 10 countries. We are putting the climate change on the ASEAN agenda to discuss how collectively the 10 countries can work together to tackle the climate change issues. And internationally, like a forum like this, we are very happy to be given the opportunity to come here to present our views and also to have discussions, and also hopefully resulting in collaborations with other countries. So if we can do all our part, I'm sure that the many hands make light work, and then the task of tackling climate change, Arctic melting, will be made much easier and lighter.
So I will keep you waiting, my friend, and take the next question and then turn it over to you. You can also use that opportunity to answer the question from Wasim. Please. Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I am Sanjay Chaturvedi, and I'm the Vice President of South Asian University with a very long-standing interest in the Arctic and polar affairs. My question and curiosity has been partly answered in the responses received just now. But looking at the fact that we are looking at the Arctic primarily in terms of Arctic and non-Arctic states, and we know that in case of Antarctica, this question has also been raised from time to time. How much of humanity is being represented in the Antarctic Treaty System? In the similar vein, I wonder how much of collective Asian thinking has gone into the question of how can we broaden and deepen the engagement of non-Arctic states to the world of Afro-Asia and the global South. Now there my question to all the panelists would be, can we identify certain areas where this could be a possibility, and the beginning of course could be made in terms of dialogue among the Asian states themselves? Thank you.
Ambassador Chung.
Well, as I said, I think one example is CALFA agreements. We already had some agreements on prohibiting unregulated fishing in the Central Arctic Ocean. We had a conference for parties, even during the difficult times for the last several years. Well, that is the one example. So I mean, I think it's that there is hidden some dynamism of Arctic relations about the promoting the climate change and sustainable development. I think if we continue some calibrated and prudent and persistent attempts to keep a dialogue between Arctic countries and non-Arctic countries, and as key members of the Arctic countries, we can go back to the basic bargain of the Arctic exceptionalism that I believe is coordination, cooperation, collaboration. This is the 3 C's. I think is the right answer at the moment to promote whatever in the cooperations between Arctic and the non-Arctic countries, and the possible answer, the solution, not a problem, to promote the further prosperous Arctic region. Yeah, that's my answer.
Well, thank you. I'm going to invite the floor. Yes, Ambassador. Yes. We have a question here from the Finnish ambassador. Then there's one at the back there with the hand up. But let's take them together, and then we have the final responses. Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's not actually a question. Is an attempt to answer my good colleague from the Emirates on his question on the structures with 3 points. The Arctic Council continues to provide a good structure, and the particular value of it is that it gives a special focus on the indigenous peoples in the circumpolar Arctic, who have a key role to play and who are on the front line of the climate change and all the adverse effects that are happening or taking place. So for any collaborative effort, involve the Arctic Council, involve the indigenous people and the indigenous knowledge. The second good framework would be the U-Arctic network. That brings together 200 universities from 21 countries who operate in the context of 64 thematic platforms. We're talking about over 1,000 scientists from around the world, including from the countries the distinguished colleagues represent in the podium. They can tackle any issue, and interested states can initiate projects in the context of the Arctic Council. And I think the third remark to make is to refer to the Arctic Science Ministerials, which have been very useful in the past. They've been convened in Berlin and Tokyo and elsewhere, bringing scientists and science policy makers to address key issues for the Arctic region and for the whole world. And yes, it is one planet. Thank you.
Okay, yes, there was a question there, yeah, and then there's another one at the back. So let's take them all as the final questions. Yes.
Thank you so much, sir. A very good morning to each one of the panelists. I'm Manvi Yadav. I am a law student. My question concerns largely 2 aspects: economic on one hand and legal and geopolitical on the other. In economic terms, if we see that the opening up of an alternate shipping route, be it the NSR as China seeks or any other alternate shipping route, would yield substantial benefits for the Asian countries as trading would become more economical. Now, given that, it brings us to the legal question that with more participants, as more non-Arctic members have incentives and interests in the Arctic region, it would require a new framework to regulate and supervise these interests, as they may be conflicting at times. So the first question that arises is A, do we see an upcoming framework regarding this in the future? And B, as we have seen in the case of most environmental treaties like the Paris Agreement or the Kyoto Protocol, the first world countries or the more developed parts of the world, they seek some incentive to stay and withdrawal by these countries, as in the case of the Paris Agreement by the United States, leaves them virtually ineffective. So how is the Arctic Council planning on realizing its vision of providing equitable representation to each state, be it Arctic or non-Arctic, while balancing the interests of the first world countries?
Okay, let's take the questions also at the back. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Larry Ibrahim Mohammed. I'm a PhD research fellow at UIT, the Arctic University of Norway, and at the same time, the coordinator of the Afro-Polar Initiative at the Political Science Department. So I have 1 or 2 questions, straight to the point. President Grímsson, you asked about political challenges within the various states in terms of their participation in Arctic governance, and we really had good answers. But I want to also ask, what is the financial cost of participating in the Arctic? And if any of their citizens were to ask them, is this financial investment in the Arctic justified, what would be their answer? The second question quickly is, you've also said the significance of Arctic, of course, Asian states in Arctic governance in terms of their research and the fact that they are the biggest, if you remove NASA from the USA. What specific aspect of an enhanced role would they want in the Arctic Council? Thank you.
Okay, so let's have the final comments. Maybe I start now here, Prasanna, in the reverse order.
Yep. What you'd asked about what would the non-Arctic states would want in the council. Basically, what I would say is what we would want is a little more say, wherein we can maybe finance the projects that we want to, and which of course concern the Arctic and us, and instead of not having any say in the council meeting, at least some say, at least we can contribute scientifically at least. That is what we definitely want. And the other answer about will there be any, I would say, framework for the, if NSR, etc. comes up, I'm sure there will be, but that will take time because all these evolve as things happen, open up, and I'm sure the frameworks will come up.
Okay, I would like to address the questions on framework in enhancing collaboration between Arctic Council member states and observer states. Actually, Arctic Council has established 6 working groups dealing with different aspects of the challenges and programs in the Arctic regions. So non-Arctic states, particularly observer states, can actually participate actively in the any of the 6 working groups to discuss issues that have common implications for all. And secondly, Arctic Council also set up numerous task forces to deal with specific issues. And then the task force is not a standing task force. It will discuss involving participants from Arctic Council member states and non-member states to discuss certain projects, contribute ideas and expertise. And then when they formulate certain policies and programs, then they will implement it. When the project is over, then the task force will stand down. So already there are structures to allow and enhance greater collaborations between Arctic member states and non-member states. And annually, the Arctic Council chair will usually host a consultation, a meeting with all the observer states and observer organizations. This is one platform where ideas from observers can be raised, surfaced to the Arctic chair directly. And the Arctic chair usually, in the good spirit of a collaboration, will entertain the thoughts, and then they will see how to amalgamate all these ideas into the agendas of the Arctic Council. So I think there is no lack of a framework for collaboration. There is only a lack of ideas and proposals to materialize all these collaborations.
Well, Ambassador Siong.
Okay, I have to say that I think Korea also have focused on the indigenous people's issue, how we can increase engagement of indigenous people. So, for example, Korea has every year hosted Arctic Partnership Week, and last year one of the theme was the Arctic Partnership Week was the Arctic and people, focusing on the indigenous people's role. And every year we are hosting some young students from the Arctic region, including indigenous young people, run by KMI and the corporate called the Arctic Academy. So let me say that Korea also is very much focused on and is trying to increase some involvement of the Arctic region, Arctic people, indigenous people. And for the framework, well, I think the Asian observer states out of the Arctic Council's observer states is quite a huge group, and so probably we can have a regular or the informal or formal some dialogue between Arctic states and the Asian observer states as one way to increase the kind of a framework, and it could be an extended version of the forum like this. And so. This is the good starting point and a good, kind of initiative to actually searching for the tangible and more effective framework of dialogue between Arctic and non-Arctic states.
Well, I want to thank the three of you for having presented to us a very clear picture of the Asian views and visions for the Arctic. A very strong list of reasons and arguments and cases. And I also want to thank you, the participants, for putting the questions.